Beloved statesman, loving father, devout Christian, friend and mentor, nearly every person who met Paul Simon has a story to share about the man behind the bow tie.
Paul was someone who sincerely wanted to make a positive difference and did so not only in a macro sense through public policies that he championed, but also in one-to-one relationships with people.
He was extraordinarily smart, somebody who was not, mostly not college educated, didn't have a college degree, but knew so much about everything.
I've never forgotten something that Ted Kennedy said at Senator Simon's funeral, and that was that had Paul Simon been around at the beginning of our American Revolution, he would have been one of our founding fathers. That's the kind of respect that people held for Senator Simon.
He wanted to get a weekly newspaper and go into politics. I remember my dad throwing the question at him once, well, what's going to happen? You run for sheriff and you lose. And Paul said, but I'm not going to lose.
Born in Eugene, Oregon on November 29, 1928, Paul Simon moved to Southern Illinois during his teenage years. As a teenager, he purchased the Troy Tribune and became the nation's youngest newspaper editor and publisher.
Turned out to be a real education for Paul. I mean, he used the newspaper as an opportunity to really get to know what was going on.
Simon began his political career as a member of the Illinois House of Representatives in 1955. His childhood dream of owning a newspaper and entering politics had come true. But that decision may have drawn ire from his family.
For one, he was sort of a disappointment in his family of origin because he was the first in a long line who did not become a Lutheran minister. His dad was a Lutheran minister, Uncle Art became a Lutheran minister, lots of Lutheran ministers in the family, and Dad chose what to many people in the family thought was a disappointing career path.
But Dad used to say, he says, I don't care what you decide to do when you grow up, but whatever you do, do it for God. And for Dad, that meant, doing it for God meant you do it for others.
And that is exactly what Simon did.
I would say, looking at his career, maybe I'm most proud that he was someone in politics for a lifetime who had a reputation for honesty. You don't run into that too often.
Well, Paul was the kind of public servant that I would hope other public servants would emulate. He was someone of integrity. He took unpopular positions from time to time because he thought it was more important to be right than to be popular.
As Simon climbed the political ladder, he left positions vacant and a daunting task for those taking his spot. U.S. Senator Dick Durbin first met Simon while working on the campaign of U.S. Senator Paul Douglas. And in 1996, with Simon's support, Durbin won victory to fill the seat held by his mentors.
But, from the start, he was more than just a political coach and someone who stood by my side during some tough election defeats. But both Douglas and Simon really kind of defined public service for me in terms of their efforts to be viewed as honest people in this business and try to establish high ethical standards in their conduct. Paul was so good, so well-liked, and such a hard worker that I knew that I'd really have to struggle to keep up with his legacy. But he was very supportive even after he retired.
He brought great dignity and a great sense of responsibility to the position. So I felt a special obligation to measure up and be the very best congressman I could be because of the standards that he had set.
Simon's political influence wasn't limited to Springfield or Washington. His spirit and reputation helped bring politics into the Simon family household for at least one generation to follow.
So yeah, that's just part of the way our family has worked now for several generations. That it's okay to shake hands with everyone. It's okay to talk about politics. In some families, they specifically don't talk about politics. In our family, we specifically do.
Paul's name was on some significant legislation in Springfield and in Washington. He certainly made his mark that way, but he influenced hundreds of lives, maybe even more, through his interaction with individuals. After he passed away, we received many letters from people who talked about what a major difference he made in their lives.
A lot of his ideas came from people who talked to him. And he didn't look at a situation as a problem. He looked at it in terms of how can we solve this, and if we can't solve it, how can we make it a better situation?
Well, I still run into lots of folks who say that they have stories about how Dad helped them with something in particular, things that wouldn't necessarily get headlines.
In 1997, after Simon had retired from the U.S. Senate, he set out to establish an institute aimed at tackling some of the most difficult challenges in the public policy arena. The organization was to be a do tank that would bring about changes, rather than the commonplace think tanks of Washington, D.C.
He had offers from banks and, lobby outfits too, where he could have earned a lot of money. But what drew him back here was just, he just loved Southern Illinois, loved the people. He felt this is where, this is what he was. and he saw an opportunity here at SIU to reach students.
There were lots of offers, many with money already attached to it, that you wouldn't have to raise the money to fund this institute. We would supply it. Here at SIU, Dad had to do the fundraising to get everything started up. But he really felt that SIU plays an important role in education of people in Illinois, in that it's such a source of education for people who have not, who don't come from wealth or power. That this is a place where many people are first generation college students. And Dad really felt a connection with that. He really appreciated that about SIU.
One of the chief challenges was that Paul Simon was no longer a sitting United States Senator. A lot of people that contributed to him as a politician, as an elected official running for re-election, don't necessarily translate to donors to a charitable organization or a public policy institute.
In 2005, the Public Policy Institute was renamed after its founder. Today, the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute continues the mission that Simon started. From bringing national and international speakers to campus and educating the public on state and federal political issues, the Institute continues to play a role in the lives of people throughout the state and nation. On December 9, 2003, at the age of 75, Simon died after heart surgery in Springfield. Word spread quickly around the state, and his memorial service was one of the most attended in Illinois history. Political colleagues from all levels of government spoke at the event, sharing memories of their lost companion.
The next 4 or 5 days, whatever it was, 6 days, were just an amazing time of gathering for the friends and the family. The campus and community people that came together with us to put the funeral together were just incredibly gracious and helpful. And it was something that we coordinated from here, but gosh, so many people did what they did well, they did for us. And I think that what the the result was a very fitting tribute to somebody who earned the accolades that were shared that day.
In terms of the greater legacy, that's going to be the things that result from the legislation that he helped get passed and championed. One of the things was water, and making it an issue, and that people were paying attention to, and that's something I've tried to continue working on.
Dad certainly would have said that he was most proud of PL 94-142, which was the Education of All Handicapped Children Act, which meant that disabled children had a right to a public education, a free and appropriate public education. And it doesn't seem like a big deal to us now because it's been around for long enough, but it was a huge deal at that point.
Well, I think his legacy will always be alive. I think it'll be alive in those of us who wanted to carry on in the vein in which he had established. No one can replace Paul Simon. He's just one of the great public servants that America has ever produced.
Whenever we'd fly into Washington and you could see the Capitol from the window in the airplane, and I would look at Paul and see his expression and how much that experience meant to him. And now it means a lot to me too. I understand why there's a lot of feeling about that is a place of hope. That's a place where things can happen, and that's where you can do a lot of good.